Perfect. I'll still do some editing afterwards to snip some stuff off. But yeah,
Mm.
that's essentially the nuts and bolts of what we want to talk about. And I think the conversation will sort of evolve into sort of like this is more of a personal development podcast than it is specifically a motocross podcast. So like that's sort of the
Okay.
tone that we're looking for as far as like having athletes who that they've learned the lessons from you. They make these massive transitions, and I've seen it. I've seen guys who they're not who they were after they've worked with you, and
Mm.
or they've worked with any really high level trainer. And then I also want to talk about working with high level athletes because there are guys
Mm.
who have worked with you that have like they've had other trainers that are very established themselves, and then they
Mm.
come over to you and working with these guys who are already millionaires. Like that's something that always blows me away about
Mm.
working with like say like an NHL hockey coach. Like there's not a single guy on that line on the bench that's not a millionaire. How do you
Yeah.
scream at those guys? How do you get those guys to like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
How do you get those guys to jump when you say jump or to ask how high when you ask jump? So
Yeah.
like it's definitely yeah, like I think that those are some talking points that are going to be interesting to
Mm.
people. And if you're ready, then I'm ready. Let's go.
Yeah. I'm good to go. So
All right,
get on, Brad. Thank you.
do it. Welcome to another episode of Racer's Mindset. I am your host, Brad Gabart. With me on the line, my co-host, Andrew Hobson. Hoppo, how's it going?
Good, Brad. How are you today?
I'm not doing too bad, man. It's the middle part of the week. We are ascending down into the weekend where I'm most likely to get some throttle therapy. I'm really hoping that I don't
Mm.
get massive arm pump due to just the lack of seat time in general lately, but that's completely beside the point. We have one of the most preeminent trainers in the sport of motocross. He has been extremely successful, a legend in his own right. Aldon Baker. Aldon Baker, how's it going?
Well, thanks, Brad. Thanks for the kind words. But yeah, no, everything's good, and also a good shout out. Hello, Andrew, and good to have you guys on here, and look forward to chatting.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. Super
Yeah.
accomplished and humble to boot. Dude, first thing we gotta talk about the championship with RJ Hampshire. It was a long time coming. So much
Mm.
work between the two of you going in there, and obviously a lot of work on his own to not only develop the skill set to be able to go that fast, but also the mental strength to be able to perform when needed. Talk to me about that a little bit.
Yeah, no, thanks, Brad. Look, I think everybody can say that you can't, you know, beat RJ with the amount of grit and effort he's put in. So it's so well deserving. So proud of him. I think the way he accomplished it and the way he finished it off. I mean, it's not easy to go into the last race tie on points, but he showed his experience. He showed his grit. He showed his commitment. And honestly, I was blown away with how relaxed he was on the day, and how I was also impressed with the way he looked at it, and it's always the way I would tell a person, and I've had a few close ones in the past, where you got to look at it that you're lucky and you're blessed to be in that situation, and then just go out there and do your best. Don't overanalyze, don't overthink things. Just stay in your zone, and the rest will fall into the right place, and that's what he did. And honestly, it was phenomenal. So we were so proud of him, and I think this will jumpstart him to that next level, which he's more than capable of. And yeah, I'm excited for to see how he develops and gets better and better as he moves forward.
What was the message and the approach on race day? Like that's it's pretty unique situation coming in with the red
Mm.
plate and one of your closest combatants obviously also with the red plate.
Yeah. Well, I'm always, the way I look at it is you can only control yourself. So the biggest part of that is your own mistakes. You've got to be diligent on hitting your marks, being consistent, not doing anything that is risky, and just maintaining that. I think all all we know today is the start is critical, especially in Supercross. The field is deep, so it does. Your whole world can change with how well you start. So the main emphasis is having a good practice so that you get a good gate pick, trying to make the best gate pick possible, having a good heat race so that you can have another good gate pick, and then making that happen. and look, he made it happen. It was especially in the main. I think in the heat race he didn't, and he had to kind of figure a few things out. But where it counted, he was on it, and then maintaining consistency, monitoring. The only person he had to watch was Levi, and then stay out of trouble. So he could mark him on the track and make sure he was not doing anything that that would get him out of sync or put him in extra sort of challenging areas with other riders. So he maintained all of those things. His attitude was good. He was very positive. Once again, he knew he was in a good situation being in that fight, and he applied that, and he rode phenomenal. Yeah.
So, did your heart rate spike at all when he started foxing with Deegan at the end there?
Yeah, I was a little bit concerned because I thought, no, don't tell me you want to try and pass the guy. But he didn't. He actually said that Deegan sort of make a couple mistakes, and then got closer to him, and he was like, no, please get going again, get going, because he didn't just want to lose time, but he wasn't planning on trying to mess with Deegan, who was obviously doing his own deal. So, but yeah, I got a little bit nerve wracking, and I was like, man, I just thank God it wasn't not another lap, because I think things were getting a little too close. So
with RJ there, Aldon, I mean, I had the pleasure of working with RJ when I was at Geico for a few years, and his determination and grit, like you said, was why didn't he do it earlier? Again, he'd crashed, he'd done a few things or whatever. Whether he's been a young kid, I mean, like I said, I seen him enter the Geico program. It's like, this kid's fast, but it took forever to get to that point. He was so close for so many years. So now he's been on your program for a few years. So when you look at RJ that started 4 or 5 years ago to where he is now, what was the biggest change, or what did you see in him that he's went, okay, this guy's getting ready, he's getting close, he's hitting all the markers, he's doing everything I said? What was the biggest changing point there for him?
Well, and I think it does come down to experience. I mean, as we know, one of the biggest positives with RJ is his grit and determination, but it can also put him in areas where he hangs it out a little too much,
right.
So there's that fine line, and I think for him it was learning that line. I've always, because he's been in my group, when I had kind of an opening, because typically I maintained with just 450 guys. And then it started when I had an opening and I had Zach Osborne in as a 250. And then when Zacho moved up, I kind of filled that spot again. I felt it was kind of a nice little like piece to have amongst my 450 guys with one 250 guy. But I always treated each one of them as a 450 guy. I felt if you're with me in my group, I'm not doing like, you're not doing less because you're on a 250. In fact, I'm priming you for 450. But you could see when we started doing that, I'd always gauge them according to the 450s. And I feel if you're going to win, you got to be as quick as the guys on the 450s, unless there's a section on the track that the 250 just cannot do. Yeah. But typically I'd monitor him if he was doing all the sections the same as what the 450s were doing. He honestly should be as quick. And that was the development of what I thought would push him. And that was our gauge. And obviously we had, good 450 guys around to make sure he was maintaining that. I think just in the past was still those little areas where he would be, close and think, okay, instead of just taking a third, he'd be like, you know what, I think I can get that second too. And sometimes that's asking a little too much and being overzealous on in that race mode. And I think that's caught him out a few times. But I do feel he's learned this each year. I have seen when I look at consistency, he's become a lot more consistent in practice and not be so sort of sketchy. I mean, he's pretty loose when he rides. He hangs it out. That's his style. So you've got to get used to that. At first I was like, oh my gosh, this guy's going to drive me nuts, because it's hard to watch sometimes. But over the years, you get used to how the way he...
Wait, that's never going to change.
No. Well, you find the thing is, once guys have a particular style, as much as we do apply, what I call, hey, technique, stick to good technique. there are the basics, but each guy has their style of that, and that once they get into those pro ranks, you're not going to really change that.
Yeah, like RJ is not going to start riding like Cooper. It just
no,
not how it go. That's not how it goes. Yeah.
no, and that's the thing, But the good thing is also, I think, a big difference was him spending a little bit more time on the 450. I think that's helped him because he actually rides that bike a lot calmer because he's not trying to get everything out of it.
You have to, yeah.
He got plenty. So I was a bit nervous of that, but we've thrown in a lot of the 450 riding, and dang, he's solid in that. So I think that also helped him calm down a bit and know that, look, you got to let the bike be a bit more freer. Although I know 250 is different, and we've struggled in the years being, I think trying to get the most out of the 250, and I think the team's done an amazing job at developing it and getting it better and better. So it's a combination, I think, between all of that that's helped him, and then obviously at the end of the day, he's the guy that's got to finish it off. But his desire, commitment, everything that I've told him, in training and that he does with full effort. It's actually really nice and he's a pleasure to have. Yeah.
Awesome. Excellent. So one of the things that I think has been sort of the specialty or the calling card of Aldon Baker is your ability to create monsters of men. And I mean that in the most complimentary way possible. Is you have these athletes that come to you, even if they have trained with a high level professional before, you're able to take them to the next level. And a part of that is communication to these athletes of what's necessary to make that transition. Without giving all of the secrets to your sauce, what is it that needs to be done for someone who shows up? You had full-blown rookies show up to like the straight off of amateurs come to your program and work with you. What needs to be done in order for them to understand the discipline and everything that needs to go into becoming that next level champion?
I think and it touches on what you just said there, Brad, is discipline is huge, and I think it gets left out there. And yes. I'm big in discipline, and I'm very big in accountability and structure. So I think that's what also, I might not be the biggest buddies with my athletes, because I will hold them accountable, and I feel like I'm hard on that accountability, discipline, and linked with structure and planning. I'm a big planner, and yes, you do have to change programs, and they do evolve, and it with each guy, and that can change daily, but it still stands with there's always a plan for each day at the track, on the gym, in the cardio, and piecing those all together. And I feel like that's a big area where I think the guys coming to me that they find the biggest change is that there's a lot more accountability and there's a lot more structure to it, So, and then look, each guy's different. You've got to evolve with this newer generation. For just speaking of that, is they're different to Carmichael days and RV days and even Dunge. It's just a different generation, which is fine. But I think finding ways and analyzing where they're at and what makes them tick and getting to know them under kind of rough conditions shows their character, and you develop it from there. I think that's probably the biggest things that when they come to me.
Yeah, because I would imagine that like just working with a guy like Carmichael, who I could be wrong, but I think he's more of a guy who you could probably scream at him and that would like fire him up and like get him going. Whereas like the next guy you really worked with, a high profile athlete, would have been James. And I think that's a very different athlete as far as the approach and the execution, and how you almost had it, like, I wouldn't say coddle, but like kind of massage that situation more than drive through with a guy like Stu.
Yeah, a lot different. I mean, look, Ricky, I think Ricky, I mean, look, his mom was a little hard on him, so I didn't have to shout much at Ricky. My mother would do it for me.
I can contest
all the stories are insane.
But and that wasn't a bad thing. She was, once again, she was holding a lot of accountability. There was a lot at stake, and I respect that in a high degree. But I think I would be the one navigating more on the training side of how am I going to get him to, obviously my goal when I first in with Ricky was all about the fitness and strength. He lacked that. And then as I was learning all about the actual riding part and what a guy could take and how that would affect my plan on training and cardio and the balance of it all. So that was different. The one that I probably had to verbally probably get onto a lot more was Villapoto. So that was a whole different ball game. And then it went from Villa to look, Stu, let me back up. Sorry, Stu was before Villa, but
right.
He was more, yes, you had to be a little bit more massaging and also getting him to understand what he was doing was important because he did analyze quite a bit. And he also knew he had a lot of ability and talent. So you had to get him to understand what was the purpose of all the rest of it when the guy was naturally very, very good, So just different dynamics with each guy. I mean,
right.
I've got Malcolm today, and I can get on him pretty hard where I could never do that with James. Just different personalities and different the way he responds. Malcolm's a lot more. He connects with you a lot in a more, I wouldn't say sociable, but a more outspoken way than like how James would, So once again, each guy is very different, and you've got to learn how you, I would say, pick your battles with the training and riding. Yeah.
So I want to go back a long time, back to when you started working with Ricky, and I was at American Honda. You came on. We were both, surrounded by Ricky. You were on with Ricky, but on different sides of the fence there.
Pair of imports.
Yeah, two totally different roles, but obviously the same goal was to win. I mean, you, with your prior background, bicycles and everything else, and then you come into this moto industry and you look at these guys and you're all, man, what am I dealing with here? Because you have so much knowledge before, right? You have Ricky, and we all knew Ricky was good because I'd worked with Ricky at PC in the 90s. So I already knew what he was like. I already knew Mama C and like, so I knew what it was going to be. I knew what he was like. And then, like I said, because I had a friend that was a bicycle pro for a while, and he looked at the moto industry and went, "Man, these guys are so far behind where triathletes, cycling, everything else is." So then you're coming into I mean, we could go on for hours on stories of what riders did, what they didn't do. They only ran for 30 minutes a day, and that was it. And then they were just, natural talented guys, like you said, like James. But then, you brought that in, and then we go to Glen Helen in like '99, and Ricky's gone, and you can start to see the transition. So I guess my question is like, what did you think when you first came into the moto industry? You said this is just an open, I'm going to shoot a shotgun and just nail everything, or did you really have a plan to go, this is what we're going to do, we're going to stick to it regardless of results, whatever it is? I mean, what was your first thoughts of that, walking into that?
My first thing, and that's a good question, Andrew. I think my job when he first employed me was to fix his fitness, and he was overweight, so fitness was going to start with, and then fixing the eating habits, getting the nutrition right, and making him, to me, I felt like, and there was no doubting that he could ride a motorcycle. I mean, right. As you say, from PC days, I even went to a couple of races when I was still racing in Europe. And because I was, I went to, I became friends with Johnny O'Meara. Obviously, Johnny was into cycling, but I'd already seen Ricky, and I used to watch him when he was still on a 125. And I mean, he would dominate there and unreal. But then obviously the big step to the bigger class was his hassle. But coming in, my goal was to honestly make an athlete out of him. Like I felt, man, I saw how impressive the teams were and their support and what was going into it. And I was like, man, the rider has to meet them in the middle. Right. You can't come to a race and say, okay, yeah, I'm a talented rider, but I'm unfit, I'm not strong enough, and I'm actually overweight. Like, to me, that was embarrassing. And it's so my whole goal was to bring him in to at least meet in the middle. That was when I was blown away when I first went to the races and even compared them to cycling. You know, it's completely different, and the amount of support and money and you can just see it that's going into these things. That's what drove me initially. Like, obviously, I have a job to get this guy right, but I was like, man, he has to meet them in the middle. And I remember asking one of the when I first joined up there, do you even, I asked the team manager, what, do you even know what he does during the week? And I was like, no, we've got our own, deal to
Right.
deal with what mechanics, bike, setup, everything like that. And I thought, man, there's such a disconnect that you just expect the guy to rock up on the weekend and look, let's go. And yes, that's what they are paying for, but there was no, like I said, connection between the whole thing about
Yeah.
what is going on,
In a sport
So
where everyone argues is that it's all rider, like a
yes,
lot of people will make the argument that like you could put me on Carmichael's bike, I ain't going fast. I don't have the skills, I don't have the fitness.
yeah,
Um, yeah, for and like you must have rolled into the motocross industry being like just licking your chops, be like, this is right for the taking. Like this is if you
yes,
put any of these guys, not maybe any of these guys, but like a highly talented athlete and inject some fitness, they'll dominate. Like they'll
yeah,
absolutely dominate. And essentially that's what happened is that
yeah,
like when I remember when there's pictures of Carmichael from I believe it's the 98 season. I swear to God he's wearing like 34 pants. And
mm,
then there's pictures of him in '01 where I'd be surprised if he's not in child's gear. Like even like
Yeah.
he had like 28 waist. Like he was a little muscle nugget of
yeah,
motocross, and that was it was. And no one had anything for it because he was extremely talented. A lot of people say like, "Oh,
yeah.
Carmichael just was fit." No,
No, he was
crazy
talented.
talented.
Yeah.
And then you met that with the discipline and the accountability and the fitness that comes along with those habits. That was unstoppable. No, and like that, I think that kept caught everybody flat-footed.
So
Yeah, I know. Sorry, Andrew.
sorry,
Yeah.
go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, no. See, that was where, like I said, I felt he had to meet in the middle because then he was going to get the best out of what he was capable of.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
in 97, when we went to Gainesville, that was when the first national was partway through Supercross in March. So that was Ricky's first full year on the 125. And we went there, and Lammy was the championship holder.
Mm-hmm.
And, Lammy was still Mitch and Bones' guy. Like, Lammy couldn't do no wrong. And then Ricky comes along. And the first moto, because I would have to go to the races with Mitch because I'd have to drive the rental car and all that sort of stuff. So Lammy wins the first moto, and Ricky comes in, barely cracks a sweat. And he goes, I thought that guy was going to get tired. And they're all, that's the national champ. He goes, yeah. But he ended up winning the second moto. But like he says, I thought that guy would be faster. No, nothing to Lammy in any other way, but that was just Ricky and his youthism, and
Yes.
he was just
Some
unpolished,
confidence for you.
polished, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And he said exactly the same thing when we went to Unadilla in '99, and he sat behind Tortelli. Or actually, Tortelli sat behind him, and he goes, I couldn't shake that guy. And they're all, he's a world champ.
Yeah.
So, there's the two different, just
40 minutes at Lowell.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
Exactly.
that's great. Like, as I say, man, Ricky was special, and heck, the 7 years I had with them, I mean, it was unreal. I mean, obviously the grind during the week is not simple and not easy, but he sure made it worthwhile when you went to the races. That was phenomenal. Yeah.
So like if there's somebody listening to this who they themselves want to take their performance to the next level, regardless of what they're doing, whether they're a
Mm.
weekend warrior wanting to just get better shape to ride more on the weekends, so they're not like me with really bad arm pump, or they're like a 3 lap hero like myself as well. What are the steps that they can take? Like literally, what are the first steps that they can make to becoming more accountable, more organized, more scheduled? Like what would you say are like basically like day one things for that?
Well, I think it goes back to planning. You gotta take time each day to plan what you're gonna do. And I always say you plan your week. So pick one of the days. And normally, I start planning the following week and on the Saturday, and then
Okay.
confirm everything on the Sunday, so that everybody and all we're ready for what is going on with the week. And I think the more detail you can do, the better you're gonna plan, and then you need someone to hold you accountable to that plan. I mean, everybody plan. I mean, the favorite is New Year's resolutions. Well, how
Right.
far do they go? So, and I think it's because there's lack of accountability. So I think it starts with planning. Then you got to have accountability. So that normally links to someone or something to do that. Um, and then also understanding where your weaknesses are. Everybody has strengths and talents, but you got to know what they are, and that takes I'd say a big step to looking deep into yourself and into the way you do things, and honestly being truthful with yourself,
Mm.
with your riding, with your training, what you hate, what you love, and then trying to put manage that into. And I'll give an example in training. I've got guys that there's many ways to do cardio training, but I will try and pick areas that I know each guy likes. If a guy don't like, let's say, the rowing machine, I'm not going to stick that often on the plan where he's literally hating what he's doing.
You're talking about
So
Osborne specifically on that one?
yes, oh yeah, I think he's burnt to the train the thing, or he'd always tell me that he of other vicious ways he'd hurt himself rather than get on that thing. So, but then he loves cycling, so then you work with that. So once again, it's an understanding of what an athlete likes, what he dislikes, where his strengths and his talents are, putting that into a reasonable plan. Also, you can't do a program that's way out of reach, and I always tell like weekend riders, allocate how much time you've got to devote to training. You can't say, well, yeah, I'm going to do an hour and a half every day, but you've got a full-time job and you've got all these your family. It ain't going to happen. Or it'll be very, very, it'll be like a diet, which is temporary. You've got to get into an area where you give yourself room and you make it at least reasonable, and then attach into that goals that you need to meet. Is it daily goals? Is it weekly goals? Is it the monthly goals? There has to be some way of monitoring your progress. So I think if you all those pieces, you can start setting up something that is actually going to make and help you and benefit you.
Fair enough. And those are some really good points. And I think one of the things that I think is something that a lot of people overlook is that progressive overload isn't just weights, sets, or time
Mm.
under tension. It's also the training regimen itself. And like I've spoken with individuals in the past that have sort of canvassed me because I've been training for a long period of time. I have a not maybe not as deep a well of knowledge as you, but I know enough to know that if you bite off like you just go, I'm gonna train 5 days a week. That's gonna last about 2 weeks. Like
Mm.
you're gonna be sore. You're gonna not gonna do it. You're gonna be by the fifth day. You're gonna be dragging yourself through it. This is not any fun, and it'll come to a screeching halt. But can you work
Mm.
out twice a week? Do that for 8 weeks. After 8 weeks, you're so in that, no problem adding one extra day to
Yeah,
that. Now we're doing 3 days a week. No problem.
yeah,
Sounds great. Do that for another 8 weeks.
yeah,
It's super manageable. You've worked it into your schedule. You're making it so attainable. Then you can move to if you feel like you need that fourth day, by all means. But you know what I mean? Starting out 5 days a week is
yeah.
it's a recipe for disaster. It really is.
No, I agree with that, Brad, for sure.
I'm gonna change subject a little bit, but
Fine, be that way.
when you started working with Ricky back in the late '90s, did you ever think that it would equate to where it is today? I mean, you've built an awesome business. You've tons of championships. You are
Yeah,
pretty much
you've
the
developed
guy in the
yourself as well.
industry. So, as an entrepreneur, you must have looked back and, like you said, you're very regimented. You set your goals, you'll set your plan. When you start to do those 1, 3, 5 year plans, are you going, well, hey, maybe I could buy a facility. I could probably do this. I could do that. Now you've added, which we haven't really spoke about, is the bicycle company inside there as well. And it's like, so you've got a lot of moving parts going on. So you obviously you've looked at scale, you've looked at where I am and where I want to go, and so where do you go from here? I mean, what's next? I mean, how did you perceive it? I mean, it's kind of an open-ended question in many ways, but I can remember you coming into American Honda or Cowie at that crossover time, and it's like, now we look back 20 years. Is this where you thought you would be, or you would be in a different spot?
Yeah, good question there, Andrew. I mean, look, things evolved. I would have never thought, when I look today with how far it's come, and even that I've been in the industry, just over 24 years.
Right.
Quarter century, no big deal.
Yeah, it is. I'm blown away. I could have never dreamt this one up, to be honest. I always looked at year by year and who I had in my stable to try and get the best of. So in a way, it was, to me, maybe a little narrow-minded, because I needed to make what I had right in front of me work. But then it did evolve. I mean, the facility, there was no way at any point. I mean, I remember, gosh, one time when I was at Ricky's and thinking, geez, how cool is that Ricky has his own place. Right. And he's got that, and good for him, and he's doing it the right way. And then, I mean, obviously, even when I was at James, I mean, James set a facility to the next level on what he put there. And I was like, man, that is incredible. Never, ever thinking that I could even possibly have something like that, because my budget was just not the same as what these high-end riders had. So I couldn't fathom that. And then it all came about just because I had to get a place, because I had riders that didn't have a place, and it was my job to make them accountable and train them. So I was forced along that line of making that happen, which I'm glad I did, but I would have never done it if I wasn't pushed or had to make it happen. And even some days I'll think to myself, sure, the whole facility part of it is another massive step that is good, but very challenging.
It's a very hands-on, hands-on, from tractors to diesel fuel, broken lines, and all that. Do you have a full-time mechanic or service guy?
Well, so in the beginning, once again, it all comes down to budget, where you think, okay, yeah, I've got all these things that need to be done and all that, but you just, you got to work with where you're at. I am at the point now, finally, I have a full-time track guy, and that all his job is maintaining the tracks. And then obviously, he's really good at also maintaining the equipment. I have a full-time guy that's just basically keeping the facility in as best as possible in the order that I feel like it should be, with regards to what I expect at the level, and also with the group that I'm contracted to. I expect a lot from them, and they expect a lot from me. So I go back to that. I don't want to be the weaker link. I want to make sure I'm meeting in the middle, that I'm providing actually more than what they expect. So that's what drives me, but it's definitely not simple, and I would have never ever thought. But I honestly say, I look at, and going back, how blessed I am, how I got into this country, how it all worked, and through Ricky, and eventually getting becoming an American citizen, and having it is truly a blessing that I would have never thought about. And the other biggest thing I look at is that, man, I just want to be a good steward of what I need to take care of. That's my biggest sort of goal, is to manage that. So it's challenging, but I love it. I'm still inspired a lot by the people that I'm around, and the riders, and the demands that are on them, and how much is at stake. And that really pushes me, because I want to see every one of the guys that I have reach their potential. And as we know, not everyone can be a champion. That is but at least are we maintaining and growing and going the right direction? So that's kind of what pushes me in a big way. Yeah.
So
So
with all this going on, what does Eldon do in his downtime? What's your other?
does Aldon have
What do
downtime?
you like to
He creates a
what?
bike company.
Yes, well, that's the other thing is like I've always been passionate about the bicycle, and
Yeah.
it was kind of how the bicycle thing came along. As that's a big part of my program, And I at one point I was just helping who now is my partner Alfredo Campo, who's a top BMX racer.
Mhm.
I was helping him as a side. I'd met him at a few events, and he was asking questions. Super nice guy. We got connected years and years ago, and I would give him some ideas on his training and power, and we chatted. And come to find out that we're both very very passionate about bicycles. And he said to me, and this is years ago, that hey man, wouldn't it be cool if we partnered and had our own bicycles instead of relying on. And I thought, man, that'd be cool. And I said, yeah, possibly. And the only thing I thought about it possibly because we're in America, is I was like, man, that's way out there.
Yeah.
But that started, a seed. And then during the whole COVID thing, when he was kind of shut down, well, everything in sport was a bit of a mess. He spent a lot of time looking all into that and getting connections, spent a lot of time in Asia through. He was actually stuck at points in Asia. And it gave him opportunity to look at where do all the bicycles come from, who are the people behind, where you get the best carbon fiber, how does that all work? And then he would relay with me, and we'd have often meetings, and it developed to where, hey, we can actually do something. And yes, it's a dream and it's a passion, but it is possible. And then that's how that kicked in. So going back to what I do in my spare time, I mean, I don't really have a lot of spare time between family, um, the business, the facility, the riders. I feel like I've got a lot of kids because I look at all the riders, and I'm getting a lot older now. Every year there's one younger, and I'm going the other way. So I look at them as almost my children. Um, it does keep me sort of on my toes. I don't feel like I mean, yes, every now and again. In fact, I'm going away in a few days here, trying to get away just between the break between Supercross and
Mhm.
motocross with the family, and that's always good enough. And I look at that in a different way. That's just getting away with the family and honestly relaxing is the biggest highlight of my personal part of things. But the rest, I feel like, man, I live a blessed life. I train with the guys, which keeps me on my toes. It pushes me because I probably wouldn't be doing as much as if I didn't have that. So to answer that question, with the bicycle and training and the facility, that is what am
That's
still involved. Much my
that's
part. That's where
that's
I'm
your
at.
one thing. That's your one thing.
Yeah.
That's
Yes,
all.
and like I said, I don't have to squeeze anything more in there. I don't think I'd be pushing the limits, but I don't play golf. I don't feel like I have time for all of that. Um, I enjoy all motorsports. Obviously, I still follow MotoGP a lot because I did train, obviously, Nicky Hayden back in the
Mhm.
day, and I still have a lot of passion. Well, and it's, as I said, it comes down to two wheels, man. I love um, all of the two wheel stuff. Yeah.
Um, one next thing I wanted to sort of talk about was dealing with, I guess criticism is the right word for it, but there's always people who will sling arrows, and I think it's funny. I think you get a lot of unfair blame or like this, say if Aldon Baker's athlete doesn't win, they're like, oh, Aldon's lost it. I'm like, is it the one trainer that like is the difference between the entire package not coming together? Like sometimes got like the bike's not where it needs to be. Some like there's a thousand elements that comes into
Yeah.
the championship. But like when the cameras go away and media guys like myself aren't asking questions, how does Aldon Baker deal with the sort of that narrative that sometimes like if your athlete doesn't happen to be the one at the top step of the podium, that there's some people who like just lay people who don't really believe in the method to your madness anymore.
Yeah, I think, look, there's two ways to look at it. That's with social media, that's just become part of what comes with social media.
Right.
That's why I get always nervous to post anything, because I feel like, okay, here it goes. I'm going to get some that'll like what I'm doing and some that'll want to bash everything else. It's part of it. I think it's just part of society. I don't look at it as it really bums me out. I mean, sometimes, and I try and also try and avoid reading stuff. I always say there's a lot of people out there that will come and tell me what's out there. And I think that's the best, because I've not wasted the time to go and listen to someone negative. They just said, hey, this guy thinks you're an idiot. And I'll be like, well, that's cool. But I look at it more if there is something negative, I do want to be accountable. So I want to say, okay, is there something I am missing? Is there something that I could be better at or change or something, without just taking it at like as a blow? Or do I analyze that, okay, you just got people out there that have evidently a lot of time on their hands. And also, most times, they're not in the trenches. They don't really know what's going on. And I can't expect them to be. So I don't really take that as oh man, I'm offended, because there's a lot of pieces to this job and a lot of links. There's like you said earlier, it takes a team. I'm a piece of the team. It's not about that, because I don't care if you're fit to this and that, but you have an issue with the bike setup or something, and you miss you're not going to win. You know, we're in a sport that is very competitive. There are a lot of good guys, and I feel like the level has been raised. There are a lot more trainers out there. It's taken a lot more serious. There's a lot of good facilities out there. So it's up the whole game, which I think is great for the sport. And even when people have moved on from me to another teams, I look at it that's a business decision. I am not bummed, if a guy moves on or he doesn't feel like my program is good for him. Look, everyone has their decisions. They all have to be accountable for themselves. And I'm honestly okay with that. I feel like the championships that have come my way with the guys that I've trained, I couldn't have dreamed of all of that. So honestly, if I never won another championship with another guy, I'm okay. That comes with hard work and dedication and a lot of pieces, and I will always respect that. So in the case, I mean, Jet just won the main, and he deserves it 100%. He's got a great team around him. I respect that. I'm still a fan and respect good riding, and I know how hard it is to do it. So there's not any, I feel, bitter or bad feelings from my end, to be honest.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
How like, you've obviously throughout this journey you've made some huge steps, and I'm sure at some point, like when you did the whole facility thing, like that must have been almost something that was sort of like the popularity and the crew that you were bringing in almost forced your hand to I have to level up to be able to handle this. Is there another step to that? How does Aldon Baker step his game up from where he's at right now?
Well, and that's tough with a facility. At least I've got to a point where, I had a goal of I needed at least 2 supercross tracks and at least 1 motocross track. Now, yeah, I've got 2 motocross tracks, 3 supercross tracks. There's no way that I want any more. In fact, I'd like to get rid of one of the supercross tracks, because it costs a lot to maintain and deal with. But I feel like I'm in a good place with regards to the facility. There's always improvements. There's always things that need to be done. The other big thing is I'm really, really, I'm contracted to the KTM group, Husqvarna, the whole group. I have a great relationship with them. I'm on my 2nd contract with them, and I really want to. My goal is to still make them happy. I do believe in being loyal. I think that counts a lot, and I want them to be happy with what I'm producing, and it's not easy to do as we develop. but there is a limit, because remember, they do pick the riders. And then
Right.
that lines to me where I have a certain amount that I feel I can cope with. I do have two trainers also that are under me that we are obviously connected, and we make that work and try and get the best for the riders, the facility, and the combined group. I do believe that the group and riding with guys that can push you will make you better, which back in the day that was not even possible and wasn't even a thing. I think things have evolved. So I still stand strong on, I think that works really well. And my biggest thing is now to make sure between mechanics, these riders, the KTM group, that we're providing and doing the best job possible, and so that is a big piece of it. How you evolve from here, it's not like I can keep adding new, guys in. That doesn't work, because then it doesn't become exclusive.
Yeah.
And then I feel like it
diluted a
becomes
bit.
where, yeah. So I think one area is, as a business, it's tough because it pretty much is set in stone. It's not something that, every year you gain more people, you gain more income, you do. That's not the case. So it is a very unique business. But I'm happy, and I feel like as long as I can still be improving and covering the goals and getting the best out of the athletes that we have at this particular time, then I'm good. I'm happy.
When we talk about building all that, I was again lucky enough to be in the both environments from PC Cowie and American Honda, and then you talk about all these guys living out of state, Florida or whatever. Hey, we've got to be in Florida, the time zones different, tracks are better, all this stuff. I mean, on the flip side of that, I can remember sitting on meetings going, at Cowie for Mitch's budget, like, Ricky having two bikes in Florida constantly. And it's like, there was many a times like, man, this budget's stretched on shipping.
Yes.
Like, we're shipping these bikes and we want him to win. And so, when you talk about all this, and I think as the evolution is like, the budgets had to adjust for it as well.
Yeah.
Because, Mitch is still, hey, I want everyone in California, whatever it is. And then you go to American Honda, and then there was many a night at American Honda we had to stay back, build a bike, an engine, chassis, goose, whoever, and overnight it, because Ricky had blown two bikes up in a day. So, from either the manufacturer or the team standpoint, that was a big strain on those budgets for a while, because we just couldn't comprehend that we were going to do this constantly. Right?
Yeah.
As opposed to like when I first came here in '94, you could drive down the 15 freeway and see McGrath, Lawrence, Emig with a bike in the back of their truck going down Railroad Canyon.
Yeah.
That's what it was. To now that, you have dedicated facilities and trainers and practice bikes, mechanics. When I left in 2004 and went back to Australia for a while, the rider would go to the track by himself. When I came back in 2016, no rider went to the track without a practice bike mechanic.
Yeah.
That was it. That was how much it evolved in 10 years. It's like,
yeah.
Oh, wow. Like, you never would send anyone to the track, like with Ramsey or whoever. It's like, you're on your own, man. You can drum a fuel, where you go. So, everything has progressed.
It has developed a lot. And those are good questions, because I do feel the budgets have had to get bigger. And to me, it only takes one to set a bar. Right. And if you're not at least matching that, I feel it will come. It will count. And it's all these little pieces that I feel make or help that champion. It does. I mean, California, and you're right. Back in the day, that's how it worked. I think, unfortunately, and as you see, California's getting tougher to find ride areas, and they're getting stricter and stricter. And then the other thing too is public tracks are difficult with pros. I remember going through a phase, especially when you get to motocross. You're riding around, and there's guys that becomes dangerous, and then you worry that, okay, what happens if your number one guy that you're giving a good amount of money to come and produce the goods
lands on me.
Yes, which we had that. I had that with Anderson riding out there. We've had that in the past where, and then on Supercross, well, they are that's a whole different ball game. So
Right.
trying to manage that. And I still say that you can, like for a West Coast Supercross, you can do it from California, no problems. That I'd say. But as soon as it starts East Coast, alone the travel backwards, forwards, and the effects that has on you. Then when you go to the motocross, I think it has become where it is important to have an East Coast base. And some people told me, "Are you trying to sell property in Florida?" I'm like, "No, I'm not a real estate agent. I'm not trying to, but you only have certain amount of choices." And I think Florida, probably Texas, and just because of the weather, and we still have our issues, but I mean, all year round, anything north, it gets too cold. It's different, so there is a limit to sort of the areas. I mean, I remember coming from Tallahassee down when I first started with Villo down to Claremont, and he was because Langston had picked this spot and had a place to ride, and that's who
Yeah,
Villo
that was originally
used it.
Langston's spot back in the day.
Yeah, and there was no one else. Now it's like a mecca. I go down the road, there's moto guys. It's Moto City down here, but it is cool. It actually used to be, this area was well known for wakeboarding. There's so many lakes around here. That was the mecca for wakeboarding and stuff. And now it's kind of evolved. But my point is, I think it's all evolved where these pieces of the pie are important. And heck, it's still probably going to evolve a little bit even further, So, as we see things develop.
Awesome. So with all of these Moto Minds or the Racers Mindset podcasts, we have these four questions at the end of every episode. We're asking every single one of our guests. I think we're going to get some crossover, some commonalities, and we're also going to get some different answers. Are you ready for those last four questions?
Yeah, hit me with them.
Perfect. What is something that you wish you did more of last year?
Something more of last year. You mean with the training or
just your development, your like how you execute, how you think you can build off of something you're doing more of now that you wish you would have done earlier? Is there anything quite like that?
I would say maybe it's not over analyzing everything. I feel like last year with a lot of the changes and stuff and what was going on, I was not careful to, and not that it really stood out, but I'd say the thing that I learned last year is I've always got to remember to stay in my lanes. It is difficult, but you got to be careful that you don't. I started to analyze other areas on machinery and this and that and bike stuff and where, what, you got to trust that the person in that's taking care of that's their job, and you need to let that go and trust. So I felt like there was some times where I was a little bit maybe wearing myself out with stuff that I shouldn't be even analyzing.
Out of your control.
Fair enough.
Yes.
Yeah. Control what
exactly.
you can control, sort of thing. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Are you an avid reader?
Probably not really. I mean, I
Okay.
like to listen to stuff because I can put it on my step climb and I can listen.
Yep.
But podcast stuff like that. But actual reading, a little bit, but not. I mean, I read the good word every morning because I feel like I need to get my I need some help. But no, not on books and much. I feel like I don't get a lot of time. Yeah.
Okay. So the question is what book are you currently reading, but what are you currently listening to that you're getting a lot out of?
The ones that I'd like to is I love, obviously people story and obviously athletes. I'll try and pick athletes that have done really well. I mean, I'm still a big fan of Lance Armstrong. I know that things didn't go with how things went with him and all the rest, but I still believe his approach and his dedication and all that. So I still try and listen to a lot of the cycling stuff, and just find area that where guys with grit, and have had tough times and how they've analyzed that and dealt with that. So I prefer to go down those sort of scenarios when I listen to his stuff or read. Um, and even when I look at books, it's all to do with past athletes and their stories, you know.
Fair enough. Who has been your greatest mentor and helped you either lately or throughout your journey?
Who's your go-to?
Um, Look, I always, my parents, had a big place in my, especially, my dad, unfortunately, I lost him a year and a half ago, but he was a really top runner, ultra distance, because in South Africa, there was a big ultra distance race that was the thing to do. Um, and he was the one that always, I felt was my guy, with the way he's approached to training, and balancing his life, and actually um, enjoying the process, because I struggled even when I went pro in cycling and left and went to Europe. It was kind of a miserable time because I didn't have a lot of support. I struggled, and
Right.
I would lean on him and my mom about seeing the best in it and trying to find a light at the end of the tunnel, because there was some, I mean, sport's not easy, and being on your own and barely making it is really, really tough, because it's hard to see a light at the end of it. And also sport is so up and down. There's always a lot more downs than the ups, I feel,
Yeah.
So I'd have to say that my parents were big in my life on leaning on them. Obviously, I had a lot of good people around and sponsors and people and just good friends. But if I had to pick that, I was blessed to have phenomenal parents that let me go and do my thing, but supported in a really good, loving way.
Do you think you'd be at where you're at without having gone through that struggle?
No, yes, I mean, so I'd never be where I'm at now without those, and that's where when I look back. In fact, in order to develop, you better be ready to struggle. I Hands down. I mean, I look back and I would question why, and what was going on, and but that is part of how you become better in areas, and I think also one of the big things is appreciate. I mean, if you didn't have it hard, you could never really appreciate the good times if it was very easy.
Well, nothing comes from easy, right? Everything comes from
No,
hard. If you won
yeah,
all those championships and like everyone thinks that they just want to skip the work, it's like
yeah,
you know what the work is, right? And you've said it. It's
yeah,
discipline. Discipline is
yeah,
the key to it all. And whether you like it or hate it, that's the discipline that you have to have.
yeah. And I think the biggest thing too is learning to embrace those hard times. You know, I would fight it in a way, and not knowing that, man, this is, yeah, I'm gonna hate it now, but it's gonna make me better. And I needed to keep more of that mental. And I feel like that's what helps me with the guys that I have now. When I see them in a difficult time, Christian Craig's dealing with a heck of a time with that elbow injury and multiple surgeries and that. And it's hard to see light at the end of the tunnel. But I do know from my own experiences that there is, it may not be now, but coming, you will be better through a situation that's been difficult. And as long as you also learn from a situation, I think if you don't learn out of a bad situation, then it is a waste. But if you apply yourself, you will learn good things out of a bad situation.
Exactly. Perfect.
There you go. Well, Alden, this has been enlightening. This has been fun as always. Every
Right.
time I've had you on the podcast, not only do I feel like I learned something, I feel like those who listen can get a lot out of it as well. And we also uncover some fun stories
Yeah.
of kicking RC's ass around the goat farm back in the day. This has
Yeah.
been awesome. Where can people find more information about your bike company?
So alcarvibikes.com. And I appreciate you, as I say, we're so excited. It is a boutique brand. It is, I mean, I think everyone that knows me, um, the details are massively important. My partner Alfredo is also in line with that. We don't want to produce a bike that is subpar. There's a lot that goes into it. And the way with Alcarvi bicycles is we don't want our customers and our people on these fine machines to be just a number. The whole difference is that you're actually part of an elite group, and that's the way we're going to look at it. And there's only limited amount of bikes that we will do per year. We're coming up to launch our gravel bikes here soon. They are awesome, and a lot is, as I said, gone into it. The quality is in, and I'm not just saying because obviously I'm a partner in the thing. They have been put through a lot of testing, a lot of development before they even came onto the market. We've got great partners in the bicycle aspects of equipment. So we're excited. The progression is been awesome, but like I said, we are an elite boutique brand, and that's the way it's going to stay. So yeah, go and check it out, elcarvybicycles.com and or elcarvybikes.com, and check it all out on there. But thank you.
That's awesome. Do you ever look at the Alcavi bikes and then look at the bike that's over your shoulder and like the stark contrast between?
When I look over my shoulder at that one, I remember how much pain was. That was at Mammoth Mountain, so I was sucking very fine air. And I think I had 2 inches of travel coming down that hill, and every time I did it, it got to the bottom, like, okay, I made it one more time without weeding it, So, but the industry's come so far, and to think, when I look back at that, to ever imagine that I could have been part of a bicycle group now that we're making. I mean, every time I ride my Alcavi bike, it honestly, I have to pinch myself that this is where we at. It's so awesome, and I'm blessed beyond, and I appreciate it. It's, as I say, it is humbling, and as I say, I can't speak enough on how grateful I am to be in America, to be an American, and to be on the track that I'm on.
Excellent. Well, with that, for Aldon Baker, Andrew Hobson, and myself, Brad Gebhardt, thank you everybody for listening to this episode of Racers Mindset. Aldon, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Andrew. Good to chat to you guys, and appreciate everything. All right.